It's over 9,000!
Welcome, Super Elite Warriors, to Final Forum, a podcast for the discussion of all things Dragon Ball. I am your host, Jelli, an elite recruiting member of the Frieza Force on a mission to find the best warriors from across the galaxy to join the greatest army of all time, and I am joined, as always, by my new recruit co-host.
This is the Bekinney.
And we're standing on terra firma on Kepler 452b.
Terra firma?
Yeah, it's a phrase meaning land.
No, yeah, I get that. It's just I wouldn't call this terra firma. Anytime we stop moving for longer than a few seconds, we start sinking.
It's just an expression, recruit. Don't take everything so literally.
Don't use fancy phrases to try and sound smart.
That's what I would never do such a thing.
What about all those times you say Earth phrases and have no idea what they mean?
I'm pretty sure I'm using those right. Anyway, yes, listeners, it would appear that Kepler 452b will not have any of the warriors we're looking for, or turn out to be the planet known as Earth, though there is a large power reading up ahead and we're obligated to check it out.
Even though it will probably turn out to be something awful that will try to kill us.
But it could be a genius warrior who has figured out how to survive on this planet and perhaps even thrive, like Broly and Paragus in the last Broly movie.
Yeah, but pretty much nothing we do ever turns out to be anything like a Dragon Ball movie.
Right, so that definitely makes us due.
Due for a right and proper ripping apart of our bodies?
Well, what kind of attitude is that?
Oh, I don't know, the right one?
You know, just imagine if Goku took that attitude when there were further levels left above his.
Oh, I smell a segue.
And with that, let's get into this week's topic. And this week, we are going to kick off a discussion of what is called the Piccolo Jr. arc, or sometimes the 23rd Tenkaichi Budokai arc. But we won't be getting to that part of it for a while. And we gotta
set the scene first.
Yeah, we're going to be talking about episodes 123 and 124.
That's right. Episode 123 is our first one. That one's titled Lost and Found. So our boy Goku just perforated King Piccolo. What's next? We know there's a Piccolo Jr. out there somewhere, but it doesn't seem like our heroes do yet. It seems Goku's first order of business is to head back to Korin's for some senzu, but Tien finds something in the wreckage, the Nyoibo. Yamcha, Bulma, and Lunch find him just as he passes out, and they tend to his wounds, and he eventually comes back to consciousness and fills them in on what has transpired. Demon King Piccolo is dead, and there was much rejoicing. Those in the know figure out who is the Earth's savior, but most are none the wiser. A society celebrates the postponements of its death day. A certain green boy gets his birthday. I guess Hatch Day, really. Anyway, back at Korin's tower, we learn that cats really are jerks because Korin sent a kid off to face his death without actually believing he could win. He did think the Dragon Balls would have been able to bring Goku back, but he wasn't sure that, or he wasn't aware that Shenlong was gone by then. Fortunately, he redeems himself by informing Goku that there's a person who made the Dragon Balls and they can be asked to bring Shenlong back. Who does he need to meet? Why, God, of course. Kami-sama, to be more specific. In order to meet him, you must be strong and pure of heart, unlike Yajirobe. He resides in a floating temple high above Korin's tower. So how do we get there? Well, conventional means won't work, and Kinto-un can't fly that high. So Korin suggests using the Noibo, as it was originally used as a pole that connected Korin Tower to Kami's temple. But wait, didn't we just see Tien find it, and Goku has no idea? Goku goes back to King's Castle to find the Noibo. Obviously can't find it. Instead, he gets mobbed by press that he doesn't really seem to care about, and then decides to go ask Baba for help. Goku's ready to steamroll her 5 fighters, but she waives her fee this time partially for Roshi's sake. She sets him to Kami House where everyone's reunited, and Goku half-assed explains that he's on his way to bring everybody back. And we end the episode wondering, will Goku be able to succeed on his latest quest? Let's hope so, because Junior is now on the warpath. And that brings us to episode 124, titled Temple Above the Clouds. Goku's now on his way to visit Kami, using the Noibo as kind of like an express elevator, if you will. Also, real quick, I think Korin might be a part of the Spider-Verse, as he was sort of just like walking up the wall as they were going up there to take off.
Yeah,
so it's possible he could be a spider person. I guess Piccolo was a canon event. Anyway, he gives Goku a bell, which I guess is kind of like a backstage pass to God's house or something. Oh, and there's a test, but I'm sure it'll be fine, says the guy who sent the kid off to die without believing in him. Back at Kame House, the crew is dealing with the press who just kind of walk into the house, like no knock on the door or anything. Oolong also commits some character assassination by pretending to be Goku to the press. Meanwhile, the real Goku is on the Noibo Express through a thunderstorm. I think I counted 3 separate lightning strikes that hit him in quick succession. That's pretty impressive, honestly. Goku takes another 4 lightning strikes before finally exiting the storm and arriving at Kami's lookout. That's a total of 7 now at this point. Korin mentions that Goku has seen Kami's face before, and by extension, so have we. He states it should be shocking. We swap back to Goku and come face to face with... Well, we haven't really seen Kami's face yet, but this one sure is shocking. For a lot of reasons we're not going to get into today. But it turns out this isn't Kami, it's Mr. Popo. Goku presents Korin's bell, and the test begins almost immediately. Goku's task? Why, defeat Mr. Popo, of course. Sounds easy, except for one small issue. Goku doesn't seem to pose a challenge at all to Mr. Popo. Popo declares Goku weak and asks if he really defeated Piccolo. All the while, Kami's observing the fight from his dark-as-hell throne room, I guess. I don't know. Goku even tries the Kamehameha wave, but Popo just sort of eats it? What's going on here? And that's where we end for the week.
Yeah, these episodes are okay. Again, we're resetting, right? We've just been through a whole lot. We've had a whole lot of catharsis, a whole big to do. We've defeated the big bad. You need to reset.
Sure, you got to set the stage for the next adventure.
You can't just jump back into a big action and bring out a big bad again.
You bring up action. I believe it's episode 124 when the fight actually starts with Popo. We get some really crisp animation there. So if you guys are fans of that, this is definitely not an episode to miss.
True. Very true. And that's why, even though there's not a whole lot at stake, there's a lot to enjoy in these episodes. You get some good humor. I like Goku not caring about all the press and
it is
wanting
nice.
to glad hand and things, and he's just running around looking for his
Where's
power
my stick?
pole. Yeah, I think with Baba waving the fee, it's almost one of those things. She's maybe doing it for her brother or whatever, but also she knows Goku could just run right through any 5 fighters she puts in front of him.
Oh yeah, he was ready to go. He was full of steam. He was like, "Yeah, let me just go kick their butts really quick. I'll be right back."
Yeah. And she's like, "No." And that I think, again, it's certainly a literary technique of Toriyama's of listen, we've already seen him do this. We're not going to see him do this exact same thing again.
But if he really wanted to subvert our expectations, he would have shown that. His game's slipping.
But no, it is, it's, do we really need to see him one shot a whole bunch of fighters and then maybe have a slight battle against the 5th, who would probably turn out to be a reincarnated Piccolo or something?
I was going to say it would be kind of funny if she does make him do it and she brought Piccolo back to be her 5th fighter.
No, we don't really need it, so I'm good with that. And yeah, we're resetting the stage. So these are okay episodes. I don't have any complaints or anything really. We're not bogged down in fillers or anything like that.
I think these are pretty important episodes for mostly just for setting the scene, like with comedy and sort of expanding the world, and also getting us a little bit more lore and backstory for the Dragon Balls and how they work.
Yeah, that is true. That's something that we've had how many stories in filler anime episodes at this point about the Dragon Balls and what they are and where they come from. I know there's that one where, like, is it Roshi is telling Krillin about them or something?
Probably.
This is a while back. But it's like a filler story of like where the Dragon Balls come from. But Toriyama himself hadn't addressed them at all to this point. So
yeah.
Speaking of addressing them and who ultimately creates the Dragon Balls, let's get into some of our notes here. Like, where does the inspiration lie for expanding the story even further to include gods as well as demons? And that's pretty obvious, right? If you've included demons, you probably want to include gods as well, especially if you're an author who loves opposites. And aside from just the obviousness of it, it's Toriyama slipping back and going into some Journey to the West stuff. Utilizing deities in the afterlife and other dimensions, you can further expand the scope of your story. And since Toriyama needs Goku to get ever stronger and feels he has tapped out all he can accomplish in a human realm, he expands to a godly realm as well. But instead of just borrowing directly from Journey to the West, where in that story you have like Sun Wukong being fired in the crucible of heaven and competing all these challenges for the gods, and it's a little bit more of his kind of origin, but still that is something that hasn't happened in Dragon Ball to this point, and it's something that Toriyama can pull from and borrow from. But instead of just pulling from Journey to the West, he's mixing in culture from Japan, and instead of just utilizing traditional Buddhist or Taoist gods as we see in Journey to the West, he's using Japanese Shinto gods. So Toriyama's doing, once again, what he's done in the past. He's going to opposites. We've explored the demon realm and demon culture. Now we're going to explore godly realm and godly culture. Why does Korin heal Goku with special herbs instead of senzu? Because shut up. That's why.
It's such a throwaway thing. Like, that's why I didn't even put it in the episode recap, because it just doesn't make any sense. We already know Senzu's going to heal him, so...
Yeah, but instead he uses... he's like, these special herbs healed you real quick. Later on, we are going to learn that... Because you wouldn't think it from these episodes that we've all seen so far, where Yajirobe is inhaling handfuls of senzu, and whenever they're around, there seems to be like a giant bucket of them, and they're being like spilled everywhere.
Yeah.
Later on, we're going to find out that these things take a long time to cultivate and a long time to grow, which we talked about when we talked about the senzu themselves and how they take a long time because they're sort of the outer manifestation of your inner cultivation, and growing a single one takes a long time. But that's not been incorporated into the show yet, but later on it will be, where they'll go, Master Korin, do you have any senzu? And he'll be like, I have 2. So
I also really like the idea that, like, we just narrowly averted disaster multiple times in this universe based on how hungry Yajirobe was at any given time.
Here's an interesting thing to discuss a little bit. Given what we know, and this is addressed in the show, but let's just make sure we make the point. Given what we know about the afterlife in Dragon Ball, and albeit this is from things we learned later on in the series, things King Yemma and going to King Kai's planet and Snake Way and all of this stuff with the afterlife, doesn't all of that conflict with what happens here? In other words, why don't Krillin and Chiaotzu and Master Roshi have an experience with King Yemma or Enma and maybe get an invitation to King Kai's planet? And that's because they were killed by a demon. And Korin actually explicitly points it out, and he tells Goku. And this is the whole reason why Goku decides to go up the tower. He's not... Goku typically is not super driven to bring people back from the dead just because, right? He doesn't want to bring his grandpa back from the dead, but that's at least in part because his grandpa says that he's happy in the afterlife. We'll maybe learn later that there's like some limits on how long you can be dead before, but that's an ex post facto type of thing. So they're killed by a demon. They are not allowed to rest peacefully in the afterlife. They will never have rest because they were killed by a demon. Their spirits now cannot pass into the afterlife. They are stuck in limbo. This is actually based on a Buddhist belief that says if one's fated time is not yet met and they prematurely die due to suicide, murder, or death at the hands of a demon or spirit like a yokai, although that's a little bit more, yokai is more Japanese, not Buddhist, but still, a spirit or a demon or something kills them before their fated time, their spirit suffers and roams around until their fated time. So like ghosts. Only then will they finally reincarnate. And this is where Buddhist ghosts come from. And it's not that dissimilar from Western ideas where we say that a ghost, is that Western? Whatever. Your standard kind of ghost superstition says that the reason a ghost sticks around, a reason a person's spirit doesn't leave Earth is because it feels it has something yet to accomplish. It's not at peace. It feels like it can't move on. It's here for that reason. And until that ghost can be pacified, mollified, whatever, it will not move on. And that's why ghosts exist. And so that's a pretty similar thing in Buddhism, apparently, which it's really, I always find it interesting when these similarities like overlap a ton like that.
Sure. I mean, there's a lot of overlap for cultures. One of my favorite is like looking at food and realizing that a lot of cultures have like some version of a dumpling. So like you've got like gyoza in Japan, you've got bao in China, and then like if you really kind of want to stretch the definition, there's things like ravioli from Italian culture, or things like empanadas or Jamaican patties. So and these are all, you know, places that have been separated by large distances for most of their history, and travel between them was incredibly difficult, yet they still have these similar points that crop up, and it's usually just because the idea is so good that more than one person ends up having it.
Right. Yeah, I always like that stuff especially because when you consider like, you know, the idea of ghosts and things like that, that is sort of an idea that's like as old as the idea of a soul or spiritualism in some way. And all of those things develop irrespective of uncrossable or borderline uncrossable boundaries. We today, it's tough because especially if you grow up, I would say maybe our age or later, which we are children of the 80s and 90s, Bekinney and I. You grow up thinking that pretty much any spot in the world is accessible. That was not always the case.
True. Yeah, no, that's very true.
And not only was that not always the case, it was very much not always the case. Like a mountain range would be an insurmountable. You wouldn't casually cross, you know, the Alps. There's like modern day folklore, although it's a real thing, but like Hannibal crossing the Alps was a big deal for a reason.
Yeah. And now people do it like in their cars.
Yeah. And so it's just interesting to me when like the idea of dumplings or ghosts, or there's all kinds of different stuff. I feel like we've talked about some of them in the past. When the culture kind of comes up with the same explanation for that's BS for a scientific, when a culture comes up with the same super normal explanation for a scientific event that can be explained with like science, I always find that really interesting.
Sure.
You know, we move on to Korin is telling Goku about Kami-sama. Yeah.
So Kami-sama translates to Lord God and refers to the highest god in a Shinto pantheon. Kami lives in jokai. That's not yokai. It starts with a J. I just want to make sure that people aren't mishearing me. Jokai, or upper realm, or upper world as it's called. This is where Buddhas, Taos, and gods live. The counterpart is Kakai, or lower realm, which isn't hell, but actually earth, where humans and animals and other creatures live. If this upper realm has existed all this time, why has nobody ever seen it? Well, magic, basically. You must be allowed to find it in order to actually find it. Think of it as kind of like like one of those Harry Potter charms that like hides the building.
Oh.
And until you know the password, it is not then like accessible to you.
Yeah, and is it Korin? Korin even explains that, I think, right? Because Yajirobe's like, we'll just take a rocket up there.
And he's like, well, I think he says something like it would just bounce right off, as almost as if there is, in fact, like a barrier that is impermeable through conventional means.
Yeah, maybe.
The power pole, actually, now that we've brought that up, or Nyoboi, or Nyoibo, not No Boy, is the way to get there. This parallels an idea in Journey to the West, where the Dragon King Ao Guang, from whom Sun Wukong takes and I'm probably going to mess this up, but we're going to give it a try, the Ruyi Jingu Bang, refers to it as a miraculous piece of iron, that anchors the Milky Way in place. It is powerful enough to uphold the galaxy. And I have this, because I'm a giant nerd, a D&D flag at the top of my head. There's this magic item called an immovable rod, where it's just like a little iron rod with a button on it. And when you hit the button, it locks its position in space-time. So it just kind of like you could hold it out in front of you, hit the button, and then let it go, and it would just hang there in the air. And like you can do all kinds of crazy stuff, like hang a bunch of weight off it, or use like a couple of them to climb nothing, essentially.
Okay,
but I thought that was a fun little
it's the inanimate carbon rod.
Yeah, pretty much. Ultimately, the power pole is inspired by the Buddhist weapon known as the Vajra, roughly translated as diamond lightning. It is the ultimate representation of masculinity, slicing through impurity like lightning and destroying whatever it hits.
It's a big old stick that you swing around.
Which is also another nice parallel, because, I mean, we saw Goku get hit 7 times at least by lightning on his way up.
Yeah.
The top of Korin Tower is shaped like the top of towers seen in mosques and Russian churches and stately places. They have sacred significance of pointing up towards heaven, and Toriyama is borrowing from them for his tower that literally reaches into heaven. Goku is given a bell by Korin. This is a Suzu bell, which just means bell, and it's a mark or seal shirushi. I think I'm saying that right. Suzu are bells used at Shinto shrines to notify the kami that you have arrived for prayer or an offering of some sort. They are most often basketball-sized, hung in the eaves of the shrine, and are rung by pulling on a rope, but they can be small and carried by the individual as well. They're generally shaped like acorns and have a slit in the bottom. Toriyama's playing with this by also having his Suzu look like the kind of bell a cat would wear on their collar, and having Korin be the one to give it to Goku. Just kind of like another little Toriyama joke for you.
Yeah. It's a nice visual gag.
A little bit, yeah. And it comes back in another couple episodes with Goku's training as well.
Mm-hmm.
Tibetan monks use a brass bell called a ganta in their own rituals, which accompanies the Vajra. The ganta represents female and the Vajra male. The inside of the bell being hollow represents wisdom and formlessness, valued in Buddhist culture, and the Vajra represents form and skill. If you perform the right rituals with a staff, the Vajra, and a bell, the ganta, you can summon gods by uniting the male and female essences. Which I think is also a nice little parallel to sort of like two halves becoming whole, and having that sort of representative of kami being basically half of a whole and the other half being down, with Piccolo Jr. now currently.
Yes. We are going to talk a lot about that in the episodes to come eventually. Kami's Lookout is a mirror image of the top of Korin's tower. So if you could picture that what the top of Korin's tower looks like, flip that upside down, and that's what Kami's Lookout looks like. I'm sure by now we've all guessed this is pure coincidence. It's not a product of Toriyama playing with contrasts at all.
No, absolutely not.
There's a lot of interlocking patterns and alternating colors in the architecture, which is a display of the importance and balancing of yin and yang. Because it's a mirror of Korin's tower in some ways, we can also presume he was inspired by Star Wars and Castle in the Sky again. And he even says he has a fascination with places that float in the air. And so now we really... when we talked about during the Master Corrin episode how the top of it looks a little bit like Bespin or Cloud City. I think Kami's Lookout 100%
I could see that. Yeah, absolutely.
Because now it's weird because in a way, by being a little creative with it in the first place and kind of flipping it upside down, he's shot himself in the foot later when he wants to do the mirror image of it for Kami's Lookout, and now it just looks like it's exactly that thing. Kami lives in a shinden, or shrine. This is a sacred place where a kami is housed in the Shinto faith. Traditionally, they are simple with just a gate or a fence, or at most a simple room to mark a sacred spot. They did not become more elaborate until Buddhism was introduced into Japan, and the ideas of temples came along with that belief system. Kami's shrine is based on Muslim mosques rather than Shinto temples because Toriyama is just trying to keep his readers from getting what they would expect. It all seems to be building towards a Shinto shinden, so he just does something different. If you like watched a whole bunch of Japanese, I'll say it, like tokusatsu and stuff like I have, if you're one of those people who's been listening along with this and you're like, hey, I agree with Jelly, I also like a lot of Godzilla and Gamera and Ultraman stuff. You have no doubt seen a bunch of these shrines and things, and I'm thinking more specifically like Gamera 3, Revenge of Iris, and then like there's also several Ultraman episodes. In fact, Ultraman Blazar, the new Ultraman that is airing right now in like episode 5, had one of these like shrines in it. And when they talk about like this shrine, as a Western viewer, you might expect to see something kind of elaborate, like a church or even a chapel. And it's usually, in these two examples that I'm thinking of specifically, it's like just a little couple pieces of wood and like a statue. And like that's it. And so that's more Shinto. They are very simple. While doing this different thing, though, Toriyama, and making his Muslim mosque, he keeps in mind that Buddhas often live in kyuden, or palaces, and in Japan, mosques are actually often considered to be palaces. And at the same time, he's drawing on culturally historic mandalas to create the look of Kami's Lookout, or Kami's Palace, because I believe in the Japanese it's called like I'm sure it's some sort of Japanese phrasing of it, but it's like Kami's Shinden. It's his palace. Mm-hmm. The base is a circle, but within that is a square, or many squares, and many shapes, and many points, and it all creates a very symmetrical pattern around the four sides of a square. And if you pay attention to the geometry, you'll see a lot of groups of 4 in Kami's Lookout. Toriyama keeps it simple rather than complicated, as is typical of a mandala, though. If you've ever seen a mandala, they are super elaborate and intricate. And this is just Toriyama wanting to do that, but also being like, I know that if I do that once, I'm going to have to do it forever, and I don't like to draw details, and I like to be lazy, so I'm going to do the simplified Toriyama version of that. Now, at the end, when Bekinney kind of passed it back over to me, he mentioned if you perform all these right rituals with a staff, with a vajra, which is the male, and the ganta, which is the female, you can summon gods by uniting your essences. I'm pretty sure Freud would have a field day with a pubescent, because Goku is what, like 15, 17, somewhere in that range?
Somewhere in there?
With a pubescent boy using a stick being poked in a hole in order to ascend into heaven.
Thanks for pointing that out. I won't be able to unsee that now. So, now for something completely different. We'll talk more about Popo in the future, but Goku has to fight Mr. Popo in order to be granted an audience with Kami. This is because in Dragon Ball, fighting is a stand-in for all types of self-cultivation. Wisdom, knowledge, spiritual peace, courage, strength, an audience with God. Want any of these things? Get good at fighting. Popo tells Goku he's the first human to be tested, suggesting, as we might have already suspected, that Popo is not actually human. These gods and upper realm beings are so powerful and yet did not assist with the fight against Piccolo. Well, yes, they are of another realm, another world, if you will. Their job is to concern themselves with that world and assist one another in their godly duties, not get involved in the problems on Earth. Though these gods can interact with people and undertake prayers for the pure-hearted, their primary role, according to Shinto beliefs, is to maintain balance and act indirectly. It is taboo for a Shinto god to directly intercede, and they must do so only in the event of utter catastrophe. They're like a maintenance crew, making minor tweaks, but only getting their hands dirty if the machine actually breaks. In a parallel with the Christian God, this causes people within the dragon world who are tasked with solving their own problems to question whether Kami-sama even exists. And I believe there's is it Futurama? I think there's an episode where Bender becomes a god.
Bender becomes God and then he meets God?
And there's that, yeah, and then there's that bit at the end where he's like, if you've done a good job as God, nobody will even be sure that you exist.
Yes.
Which kind of parallels that here.
Yeah, and this is also like, this is our first hint of something that we're going to see more and more and more in Dragon Ball. And I think I want to save it a little bit for our more open forum discussion, but so we'll circle back to it because we just have a few more notes. But the idea that the gods are flawed.
Sure. It reminds me of like the Greek and Roman pantheon, honestly.
Yeah.
So Popo's challenge to Goku is to eliminate unnecessary movements. In Japanese, he challenges him to be still as the sky, yet quick as lightning. And the kanji he uses for sky is the same symbol as the ku in Goku, which we talked about meaning empty. So Goku is going to learn to utilize his emptiness in order to improve his speed. He needs to learn calm and train himself mentally and spiritually as he has so rigorously trained himself physically. It's a difficult thing to achieve because the sky is calm and formless while lightning is violent and with distinct form. This type of training is seen in Jackie Chan movies, especially Fearless Hyena, where after suffering a massive setback in the form of the murder of his grandfather, Jackie Chan is taken in by another old master who tells him he must perfect his kung fu by eliminating unnecessary motion. The difference is that the master in Fearless Hyena is trying to draw out Jackie Chan's emotions and kind of put him more in touch with those feelings in order to be more unpredictable in battle, while Mr. Popo is challenging Goku to be emotionless.
Yeah, and this is a theme that's going to keep popping up throughout Dragon Ball. And we'll see it just kind of more and more and more. Goku, you've already, or just by the virtue of who you are constantly pushing yourself physically harder than anyone. And what's going to set you apart?
Breaking every known human limit.
What's gonna set you apart? What's gonna make you even better is not any more physical training. It's gonna have to come from within. It's gonna have to be a mental change. We see that with his training as he heads to Namek. Well, we're gonna see it before that too. I'm sure when he's training with King Kai. And he learns to harness the Kaioken. You're gonna see it when he's heading to Namek. You're gonna see it on Namek when he's fighting Frieza, and he ultimately winds up going Super Saiyan, and that's going to actually be really well paralleled with Vegeta. By the time Vegeta actually turns Super Saiyan, his like base form is more powerful than anyone's by a lot, because he's training at like 500 times gravity, and Goku trained at like 150, I think.
I think that was the highest it went.
Yeah. So he's base form. Vegeta has pushed himself to the limit physically. The change has to come from within. It has to come from a mental change of some kind. And that then is even carrying through. And we saw it most recently in Dragon Ball Superhero, where Goku and Vegeta are challenged to fight each other without transformations. And is this also where Vegeta makes that comment of like, we fought Jiren and we fought all these guys. Their power level's not much stronger than us. What's the difference? They're like better meditative, or like they use less motion. He says something like that.
Yeah, I believe so.
He says it in either this or the Broly movie, I think. And that's what's going to be happening here with Goku. So getting back to this idea of like, just briefly, the gods being flawed. This is something that I'm sure you could probably talk a lot about whether I wish I knew more almost about like Shintoism and Buddhism and things like that to talk about is Toriyama just kind of playing with more of the same, or is he bringing about questioning of these religions and whether we should follow them? Because yes, if Popo is strong enough to like handle Goku with basically a finger, he could have straight up destroyed Piccolo easily.
Sure.
But the gods don't get involved in our petty little squabbles, even though they are the gods of Earth.
Yeah, I guess it's just one of those instances where they kind of just show up and phone it in. I guess I don't know.
It's 100% a thing that's, again, it's going to become another recurring theme, and we will keep pointing it out as we go along. The more we end up learning about the godly realms, and that becomes more and more of a thing, especially becomes a huge thing at the end of Z and on into Super. You learn more and more that they're not all very good at their jobs.
Yeah, that's true. Which plays into the flawed thing beautifully.
Yeah.
In all honesty, me personally, I don't know if there was a greater thought behind it. I'm wondering if this is just a Toriyama going, well, people expect gods to be perfect, so let me just make them old weird dudes.
It could be that. I think it could also just be like an Eastern mentality of gods, because when we talk about Journey to the West, and neither one of us has read it, but we've talked enough about it at this point, you hear about Sun Wukong became a stable boy for the gods in heaven, and while they were off drinking and partying, he like wreaked havoc with the horses of heaven, and then they tried to kill him in a crucible, and then it actually just made him stronger. And these gods are constantly like fighting each other and bickering, and so an Eastern mentality, and in fact a more polytheistic mentality typically sees the gods have more humanistic traits than Judeo-Christian gods.
Yeah, absolutely.
The Judeo-Christian God, yes, we are told that he has got a human figure because man is made in his image, but beyond that, he is like the perfect being, and he is inaccessible. Whereas when you look at more of the polytheistic religions, and especially when we talk about like Buddhism, people can become Buddhas. People can become kamis.
Mm-hmm.
And so there becomes like an element of they're more flawed potentially by nature, because they weren't God. The Christian God wasn't born, but they weren't born perfect. They weren't perfect from the moment of their beginning of their essence.
Right, I gotcha. That makes sense.
It's just a different cultural thing. So
sure, and me personally, I kind of prefer that, because I mean, when it comes to storytelling, a perfect being is not a very interesting thing to write about.
I mentioned that when was that our last episode? What episode did we talk about Dante's Inferno? That was recent.
That was recent. Yeah. So, folks, don't grow older. Your memory starts to suck.
But whatever episode we talked about that, I mentioned that like I've never read Paradiso, but I've heard that it's boring.
Yeah, because I mean, you're describing utopia. Really, it's just going to be depressing for whoever has to read it. It's like, oh, look at this thing that I don't have and never will. It's like Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous, but even more drastic.
Yeah, which I do think you can do interesting things with sometimes, right? Because I mean,
yeah, but it's usually like their response to an imperfect being, like, you know, a mortal.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like there still has to be that little bit of unpredictability that is part of the human condition that makes the story interesting.
Or you use it as like an allegory of like a thing to strive towards.
Mm-hmm.
The example I think of, because I wouldn't say it's 100% utopian, but I'd say it's a hell of a lot better than the future we're racing towards, is like Star Trek.
Yeah, I get you.
Star Trek is a united planet, and there's like no poverty, and there's easy healthcare for everyone.
Yeah.
But there is still war.
Yeah.
So
I guess they haven't solved the big problems.
Because there's still the Klingon Empire, right? So there's still it's Star Trek is not a perfect society and not a perfect
right. But they are definitely striving for it.
Yes, and so you can use stuff like that in a, because then even the Star Trek stories, right, are all about them like visiting alien planets that have not been introduced to the Federation yet, and so kind of butting up your quote unquote perfect society against an imperfect society. So yes,
Superman's kind of a similar situation to that a little bit, but it's more that people perceive him as almost godlike. But the reality is that like he's not. He still fails in some aspects, and that's really what makes the character interesting.
Right. That's why he's the Christ-like figure very often.
Mm-hmm.
But so yeah, we're getting into the Piccolo Jr. stuff. We've mentioned this before. The further we get into the end of Dragon Ball, the more I recall liking it, but also the less I recall specifically about it.
Yeah, no, there's definitely been some stuff in this training arc that I completely forgot about.
And I think that might be, I don't know for sure, because it's been, like, at this point now in my, like, this is not the first and not the second time I've gone through Dragon Ball.
Mm-hmm.
Is it the
Same
third?
here.
Is it the third? Is it the fourth? I don't know. And I also think at one point, and now I'm going back to like being very young, I think at one point I was like, oh, I'm going to rewatch Dragon Ball. And I got like, what I tend to do when I rewatch things, and this is another reason why I've actually really enjoyed doing this podcast, is I tend to not pace myself. I tend to not say, all right, I'm going to watch an episode a week or 2 episodes a week. Or
yeah, you end up binging as much as possible, as fast as possible.
Yes.
Yeah.
And at one point, let's say 15 years ago, I was like, I'm going to rewatch Dragon Ball, but I'm not going to binge. I'm not going to like watch all 300 episodes of Dragon Ball in, 15 days. I'm going to pace myself and watch 3 or 4 a day, or not a day, but 3 or 4 a week until I watch it all over the course of time and really absorb it. And I think I probably fell off somewhere in the end of the Red Ribbon Army because life and time just kind of get in the way of things.
And that's also kind of a little bit of a lull in the storyline too, which sort of eats at the motivation to keep going.
And so I've visited that portion, the initial through Red Ribbon, more times than I have the back end.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't remember a whole lot of specifics about this, but I do know I like it.
So my issue with Dragon Ball, as far as like viewing experience, has been, because this is like you, this is probably my 4th or 5th time watching this. But usually I skip filler episodes, and I, like you, when I'm not taking my time with the series, I also tend to skip a lot of the early stuff and just go right to the Budokai Tenkaichi tournaments and watch those, because those are my favorite parts. But kind of like you said, taking this slower, sort of more trickling pathway through this, and then getting the extra content through, all the stuff we find for the notes and little things that we start to make connections with other stuff that we have seen in our lives, really has helped me better appreciate the stuff that I used to just pass over before.
Mm-hmm.
And really helps me get a lot more out of this narrative than I was before. And I'm very much enjoying that.
And I'm looking forward to I'm looking forward to a lot because I know there's a lot coming up. We may have like a revisit of the Chi-Chi discussion because I know she is going to reappear. Spoilers, I guess, for anyone who's who's been going through this blind.
In case you were worried that she was going to be another launch and never show up again.
There's a whole lot to unpack with Piccolo Jr. and how he.
I like to refer to him as First Vegeta.
and how he differs from his father and that whole actual, like, is it his father, is it a clone, all that. We're gonna have like that kind of discussion. There's our very next episode, ladies and gents, is going to be our Mr. Popo Spectacular, so so look forward to that one. So there's going to be some really interesting stuff to visit coming in the forthcoming episodes. I'm very excited to get into it, and I know we've got another tournament coming up, so I'm also excited to like get into the tournament and wind our way through the theme of that tournament. So
yeah,
which I'm pretty sure is like, it's basically going to have something to do with like everyone having like a fake identity, because Piccolo Jr. doesn't enter the tournament as Piccolo Jr. He enters it as Ma Jr., which like, I'm pretty sure even in Japan, that's like his name is Ma Jr., which that would mean like evil Jr., which just would be like not much of a hidden identity, but it is very much one of those things. It's like a Superman situation. We've mentioned no one recognizes him until like he takes his hat off.
It's literally Master Roshi with a wig, and nobody realizes it.
Yeah. So you got Ma Jr. I know Kami appears in the tournament as not Kami. Chi-Chi, when she's in it, is not Chi-Chi, like, because she has like a whole interaction with Goku where he doesn't remember who she is.
Yeah, I forgot what the pseudonym was that she took.
We'll find that out.
Yeah, it was something innocuous if I remember correctly.
So yeah, it's gonna be fun revisiting this, especially because everything I just said is as much as I remember about everything.
So there's probably a lot of stuff there we're completely forgetting.
Yeah.
And then there's the wrap-up post-tournament, too, which most people never even talk about.
Yeah, all the filler of, like... Oh, there's another thing I remember. There's, like, a whole episode, and that's going to be maybe an interesting one to talk about. Isn't there, like, a whole episode where Goku and Chi-Chi go and get the Bancho fan?
Yeah.
But didn't we learn way back in, like, chapter probably 15... that Master Roshi
destroyed the Bancho
grease
fan
on the Bancho fan and threw it in the garbage?
Yeah, something like that. So is that episode just Goku just like plowing through a landfill?
I can't
his farm field training.
I can't remember if they. I can't remember anything about it. Like if they're gonna acknowledge that at all. Yeah, it's gonna be fun going back through all this and kicking off this arc. That's pretty much all I had.
I'm good.
Look, we're approaching the reading on our scouters.
I see a mound of some kind up ahead.
As we tread across the gelatinous surface of the planet, its reddish-orange ground jiggling slightly, harshly contrasted against the purple of the sky and white of this planet's sun, I do in fact see a mound up ahead, as Bekinney is stating.
Is it moving?
I think you're just jumpy. We're moving. Everything on the planet's surface is moving. It's not all exactly rock solid.
No, it's definitely moving.
What?
Oh my god.
What?
We gotta get out of here.
What?
You can't tell a civilian bobbit worm from this distance?
A civilian bobbit worm? That couldn't be possible. We're hundreds of light years from Servilis. How could a civilian bobbit worm get out here?
Then it's some other kind of bobbit worm, native to this planet. Point is, it's big, it's got massive pincers in its jaws, and it's coming for us.
Okay, let's run.
Wait, don't run.
What?
I already started to run before waiting for you. The force of my running steps powered through the planet's surface and... I'm stuck.
Hang on, I'll pull you... I'll pull you out.
Come on, pull harder.
No good. I can't. You're stuck. I'll get the ship and be right back.
By the time you get back, I'll be eaten.
Nonsense, recruit. You always find a way out of these situations.
No, I don't. You're just an idiot.
That's it. Keep up that fiery spirit, recruit. I'll be right back, I swear.
Ah!
Listeners, as Bekinney struggles to free himself and is probably not actively already being eaten by the giant carnivorous worm.
Oh God, it's chewing through my rib cage!
We'll take our leave of you. Will I make it to the ship in time? Will Bekinney free himself of the planet's gelatinous surface? Find out next time and help us achieve our final forum.
Final Form is written and produced by Tom Gwelly. It is performed by Dan Kinney and Tom Gwelly. Our webmaster is Dan Kinney. Our theme music is provided by YouTube content creator GVG Kid. Want to learn more about the Dragon Ball universe, including concept art, behind-the-scenes interviews, and recommendations from Jelli and Bekinney? Connect with us on social media. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at Final Forum Pod. Make sure to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you receive your podcasts. And of course, make sure to share it with your friends and family and help us spread the word of the glory of Lord Frieza. The Frieza Force thanks you for your listenership.